Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Mark Malcomson. I have the huge honour and privilege of being the principal of City Lit, and I would like to welcome you on this slightly overcast Wednesday to a City Lit's Perspectives event. Last year, during our centenary, we decided to continue the heritage of the previous 100 years and have a series of talks and discussions around really important topics of the day. What we did in that first year was have them in locations like the British Museum and the Guildhall. We had Grayson Perry do a fabulous talk, and we had Professor Ian Morris from Stanford University. And those talks got many hundreds of people attending in person at the various locations. With the lockdown, we had to postpone a couple of our talks in person, but we also decided that lockdown presents a challenge, but also an opportunity to discuss really important issues, particularly those that are related to City Lit's work, and also the impact of the virus and the pandemic. The first talk was by Sir Vince Cable, the former Liberal Democrat leader. He talked about economics and the effect of the virus on the economy. A couple of weeks ago, Ruby Wax was interviewed by me on the subject of mental health and well-being during the pandemic. And actually now I am genuinely delighted to welcome two fabulous guests to discuss issues around learning disabilities and also how that has been affected during the lockdown and the pandemic. So let me just give you a brief idea why this matters so much to City Lit. Now, quite a lot of our stakeholders are on this broadcast. Learning disabilities has been something that City Lit takes great pride in being part of the dialogue for the last 40 years plus. We have a wonderful department that works with over 100 students every year across performing and visual arts and also self-advocacy. We have two of our fellows who are very important parts of our constituency, who are hugely important within the learning disabilities community, and both of them I think are on the call today. Baroness Professor Sheila Hollins, who is one of the great advocates around learning disabilities and the founder of the amazing charity that City Lit is very close to called Beyond Words. And Gary Boulay, who is another amazing advocate, who's also a City Lit fellow and a former student of City Lit and has gone on to great things. So our community and our greater part of City Lit, learning disabilities and our learning disability students are a huge part of that. Saba, we've got to know over the course of the last few years, and she was a very welcome guest very early on in our theatre after it had been refurbished, and was part of a wonderful kind of evening where Gary was part, or Sheila was part of, and we discussed many, many different aspects of the learning disabilities community and advocacy. What happened about 10 months ago, Saba reached out to me and said, would I read the galleys and the pre-work on a book that she was editing? And of course, I was delighted and very honored to do that. And I wrote a little endorsement, as did many people. I was probably one of the least important of all the people involved. And this is it. It's a truly, truly wonderful book. This is a fabulous bit of product placement. I can't promote this book enough. It's called Made Possible. And Saba has edited and brought together a group of people and their stories. And each one of those stories is very special and very different. And after we kind of knew the book was being published, we'd originally decided to invite Saba and at least one of her fellow authors into the college. Well, that hasn't happened because obviously circumstances have got in the way. But we decided to use this as an opportunity now to do this virtually. And in fact, actually, we've got more people signed up virtually than we would have had room to fit in the theatre. So in a way, it's not quite the same, but it gives us a different opportunity. So that's where we are. During the course of the next 50 minutes, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce Saba and Dan. I'm going to hand over the floor to both of them and let them have a conversation. And then in about 25 minutes, I will be looking at the question and answers feed. So for those of you who are familiar with Zoom, there is a Q&A button that you can press and bring up a little box for you. Those of you who aren't, if you go either to the top or the bottom, depending on what machine you're using, you're able to bring up the Q&A. If you've got a question you would like to ask either Saba or Dan, then put it on there and I will try to include it in the sessions that we do in the question and answer session towards the end. So if you can do that, that'd be magic. But without further ado, I would like to welcome both of our guests. Saba Salman is a exceptionally experienced and wonderful journalist and writer. She writes the Evening Standard, The Guardian, as well as an author of many articles in magazines and in books, and is really the motivating force behind the book that's been produced. So Saba, as I said, is a great friend of the college, and when we asked her to do this, she was very gracious to enthusiastically embrace the chance. Dan is a new friend of ours, and I'm very, very privileged and honoured to have a gold medalist Paralympian swimmer. Dan has won numerous medals around the world, speaks and advocates in many different forums, and really has got a truly inspiring chapter in the book about his story. And really, between the two of you, I'm going to sit back a little bit and allow you to talk to each other. You've obviously got a great relationship and you know how each other work. And then, as I said, in about 25 minutes, I'll have taken some of the questions. For those of you watching, of course, we have our wonderful colleague, Charmaine, who always gets embarrassed when I call her our wonderful colleague, Charmaine, because she then has to translate it. And obviously another very important constituency within the college is the deaf and hard of hearing community. And like all of our events, we have simultaneous translation into British Sign Language. So welcome Charmaine, welcome Saba, welcome Dan, and I'd now love to hand over to both of you. Saba, thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to the wonderful Charmaine. I'm going to ask Charmaine to say that again. It's just brilliant to have this support, and yes, I did embrace this opportunity because this book needs to reach more people. So I suppose I wanted to create this book and work on this book because of my sister. So I guess she really is the motivating force. So my sister has a learning disability, and she is somebody that society wouldn't think of as successful. So that the words learning disability and success don't usually go together. So that's really what drove the book. And those were my reasons for approaching Dan to rewrite that narrative that success doesn't apply, ambition doesn't apply, aspiration doesn't apply if you have a learning disability. And it was really important to get those direct words across. So those, I guess, were my reasons. And I approached you, Dan. So I thought it'd be interesting to sort of start off by saying, or asking you, why did you want to get involved? What made you say yes? And thank you for saying yes, because it's a brilliant chapter.
Yeah, so the main reasons I wanted to get involved were basically with how I work, getting my story down on paper was obviously something I couldn't really achieve on my own. So to get my story out there, for people to be able to read it, and I suppose like see and have like that opinion, like you're just saying, of people with disability or learning disability having success, and it's also to maybe like try and inspire and demonstrate that we can really push through our difficulties and maybe other people's perceptions to how we can actually succeed and what we want to succeed in. that's probably one of my, or the main reason why I obviously jumped at the opportunity that was handed to me in being part of the book.
And one idea of inspiration is something I think that is even more important now, isn't it? And I know you and I have talked a lot since, well, before publication and, you know, since, about how important this book, it's become more important because of what's going on with lockdown. So I thought it might be useful to sort of get an insight into how things have changed for you during lockdown and how you've had to adapt.
Yeah, so for me, for lockdown, at the very start of lockdown, I was in full-time work, obviously not swim coaching, but I work in mental health as well. So I was in full-time work, probably doing slightly more hours than normal, really. But as part of my well-being, I've got to kind of stay active. The wife, if I've not been out running or something like that, it throws me out of the house practically because I'm walking around. So I was out on the bike and basically hit a pothole. The bike stopped dead and I didn't. And I ended up with a double open fracture and stuff in my wrists. So still going strong. So since then I've been on a complete lockdown, not been able to drive, or, you know, obviously everything's been shut, so I can't even walk down to the local Costa and go and get myself a drink or anything like that. So at the start of lockdown, I was in full-time work, still had plenty of routine, which I really like. Got to have a routine. And then obviously it's kind of about turn. So like I've been in lockdown. If you're hearing the squeak going on, it's because we've got an 18-week-old puppy. So that's kind of kept me entertained. But it's all been a bit different. But what's interesting is more like I can cope with change, and I can cope with trying to find new strategies in how to entertain myself, basically. But what about you, Saba? Like, have you spoken to, you started off this thing about saying about you started the book because of your sister. It'd be interesting to find out how you've coped with how your sister's having to cope.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because actually everybody involved in the book, all of us have been talking. I've been speaking to all of you, you know, before the book launched, and all of you have asked after my sister, which I just love, because so often, you know, I've got two sisters, and so often people say to me, oh, how's your sister doing? And I know that they're talking about my sister who doesn't have a learning disability. So that's part of it, that for me as a sibling, I know that, you know, people or society generally overlooks people like my sister. And with lockdown, that's got worse, because, you know, like you said, that you cope well with change, always like routine. So my sister thrives on routine, and her routine has completely vanished. You know, as it has for all of us are struggling with this. But for my sister, that stability's gone, and we haven't been able to see her. So I've only just seen her a couple of weeks ago, managed to see her, and it was wonderful to see her, but it was really tough because there's no guidance from government at the moment about supported living, which is where my sister lives. So where she lives, she has a shared house, and then she's got support in the daytime from care staff. But because the government has not updated its, you know, its protocol, its guidance for supported living, all her care staff are having to really be cautious and to keep all of the restrictions that were in place at the start of lockdown. They're still there. So it's really tough for her, and it's tough for us. So aside from all the worries we all have about learning how to use Zoom, you know, keeping children and animals out of the room, all of those sorts of things, there's something more than that, which is I worry about where this situation is going to leave my sister. You mentioned well-being, and you're quite right. All of us are struggling with the enormity of this and getting out, and we're starting to emerge, aren't we, from this period. And I'm sure you'll get that coffee soon down in Costa.
Yeah.
But for my sister, she can't do that, and that does really worry me, because I worry she's less visible. She's effectively, she's more isolated than she was before. She's having to stay within that household isolation. So yeah, it's been really difficult. It's been really challenging, actually really tough.
So how have you found like having to maybe like support her? Have you had to change how you've had to support her?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, so usually I see my sister a lot, because we have to have that face-to-face contact, because she does not use the phone. She doesn't. So you and I chat on the phone, you and I text. She doesn't speak on the phone at all. She might send a very minimal text, but without the face-to-face contact, it's really tough. So I've been sending video messages, and trying to connect with her that way. So that's how I've sort of adapted. But I'm just really glad that at least I can see her, even if I can't give her a hug, because that's what we're all desperate to do, really. So yeah, it's been really, really difficult. But it's interesting, because when we first met, Dan, and I asked you about support, like what support you had, and we were talking about my sister and stuff, and you did exactly what you've just done then, which is that you threw the question back at me, which is really interesting as someone who usually asks the questions, but that's exactly the point of the book.
Yeah.
So yes, I wanted to ask, why do we not talk more about support? Because I asked you early on in the book editorial process, who supports you, what networks do you have that have helped you achieve what you've achieved? And instead of answering the question, you said to me, well, who's helped you be here today? And yeah, I had to say, well, it's my friend that picked up one child, it's my mother that's driven up for an hour to come and look after the other one. All of these things, it's colleagues. The book wouldn't exist if it wasn't for support from City Lit, from all the people and organisations that have got behind it. It hasn't just emerged from nowhere. It wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you and all the other people involved. So why don't we talk about support? Why aren't we not honest that all of us need a little bit of help?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think we're, as a society, maybe find if we ask for help, it could be a sign of weakness, or we're kind of scared of admitting that we need help. And that could be, literally for me, it could be as help as reading the board at a train station. I'm brash enough to just go and ask anybody, for the help. But sometimes, like, I've got a friend that he can read a lot better than me, he can write a lot better than me. But he'll stand there for ages, for example, looking at the board, trying to work out what train or what platform. I'm just using that as an example. Whereas I'll do it in a fraction of the time, but just go and ask for help. So I think it's about maybe admitting that everybody needs help in some things, but we can also celebrate that, as in you can also be the one to give help and support back. So I think that people with like learning difficulties sometimes feel like they're always having to receive help and receive, rather than being able to celebrate what they can do, and how they can support friends and family. I'm super lucky that I've got a sister that very rarely missed a race, and a sister that came to all the big events, but she was the one that would support me in completely opposite ways. She'll be there calming me down before a race, telling me what she'd just brought at Primark or whatever, whilst the other one's going to get me my sandwich that I'm going to have for my dinner as I'm getting ready for the final. So it works in different ways. I've obviously got my mum that was unbelievable support, all the way through my swimming career, and my dad that wore a ridiculously bright top every time so I could spot him without my glasses. So, you know, it's all about what support you need.
Yeah.
But,
I love what you said there about the fact that it's not a one-way street, and that's the whole point of Made Possible, and certainly that comes across in your story. This isn't just about you know, someone giving somebody like Rana, my sister, or you know, giving you support, but it's what you put back in. And you know, what the book shows through your story and everyone else's is the rich contribution, and you know what we miss out if we overlook that. And,
yeah,
and you know, working on the book and talking to you and everyone else involved, it really is so stark how far we've come in terms of attitudes and how things have changed. I think we are, you know, we are starting, obviously, because it's all there in the book, we are starting to see these, you know, fantastic examples of support organisations, of families working together, where success is what it's all about, success. But I wondered, from your point of view, what do you think has changed, like from when you were a kid? Because you began to swim at the age of 4, I think, didn't you, when there was a canal in the back garden of your parents' house and they were worried, and then you just didn't stop. And
yeah.
you know, so do you think there's more opportunity now? I mean, we had the 2012 the Paralympics. I mean, that was an amazing kind of landmark. What's changed, do you
So
think?
I think a lot has changed. There's still an incredible amount of work to do around, especially around the learning disability side, I feel. Whereas the physical side has really come on leaps and bounds. So I think we need to kind of try and catch it up. In regards to like my swimming, for example, I fell on my feet completely. Luckily, my coach for 18 years, I ended up marrying his daughter. So you know, so he and his daughter swam with me in the learning disability side. So there's still a lot of education, I feel, around coaching, teaching and everything like that, about how we can how people work with a learning disability. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can't do it. So I was at a coaching squad, obviously before lockdown, and I was just trying to explain that, you know, what's the difficulty? You write down 100 freestyle, and in swimming terms, that's just 4 lengths. So you just put a bracket in 4. So then the person with the disability, you've not wrote a different set, you've not made it any different. You've literally just put a number 4, and all that she sees is number 4 freestyle, and off she goes. You know, so it's about trying to make it accessible, but trying to keep them as part of the group as well, and not different. Come on.
I was saying, it's such a small adjustment, that, isn't it? The fact that what you're talking about is, instead of you know, writing the information in a particular way, that traditional kind of easy, you do it without thinking, just change it slightly so it is just more accessible. And that's about attitude, though, isn't it? That's completely about attitude. So what can we do to change that more? How do we get more of what's been made possible out there?
I think the book, for example, is a great way. I think it's about trying to demonstrate what we can do and celebrating the achievements, so then people see it. And then I'm just going to use swimming as an example, but let's say someone read my book, and then little Tommy walks in through the door, that all of a sudden they might think, oh, okay, actually they can do it. We just need to try it a different way. I think it's celebrating the achievements, and then with the college and getting the training out there, really, for coaches and teachers. I think people are willing to do it, but they're scared of getting it wrong.
Right. So instead of, yes, they don't want to try in case it goes wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Some like So for example, that coach that I was talking to you about, he was like, well, won't they feel like you're picking on them because you put that number 4 there? And it's like, well, speak to them beforehand, let them know that's what you're going to do. You don't talk to any other swimmers, the squad about it. You just kind of do it, and then it's like a secret code for you to know about, and then the swimmers will pick up on it, and then they learn. And if the coaches forgot to, on a certain set, to put it on there, they'll just whisper. I have many of a friend that would just say, oh, it's 4 lengths, Dan, enough let it go,
And I think what's interesting about your career is that you've been on both sides. So you've been a competitive swimmer and, proved there's an inclusion in terms of sport, in terms of the, I'm going to call you performers, not the sportsmen, the athletes. But now you're a coach. So you're on the other side. And I wondered how important you think it is to have more people employed, more people with learning disabilities. Actually, I think that the figure is something absolutely dire, like 6%, less than 6% of people with a learning disability have a job.
Yeah.
But the actual number that want a job obviously is more like 60, 70%. And so as well as the attitudes that make people open to, what you say, kind of coaching somebody and changing how the coaching information is presented, as well as that, the attitudes, it's the physical change of having more people out and about. I mean, obviously it's lockdown at the moment, but when things get back slightly, we have more of the new normal. How important is that, do you think?
I think it's about, it kind of loops back a little bit to that support. So it's about doing and helping people achieve whatever they want to achieve and their goals, but not doing it for them. So I've achieved various things in my life and I had a lot of support doing it, but I've had not done for me, So for example, like I said, my sisters before, they would, oh, I need to go and get a birthday card. Can you pick me out a male birthday card? Then they would be like, well, no, you can do that. So it's about support there, in case I picked up the wrong card or whatever. But it's about the flip side of that is, well, you know what you're doing. You're getting the male one, so you're looking at the blues and the certain colours, and off you go and do it yourself. So it's about having the support, and then to get them into employment, it's just about that education that I was saying before. And I talk about the coaching and the teaching side, because obviously that's what I do. But in an office, I was in an office a couple of years ago, and I was trying to explain that it might take them longer to do it, somebody with a learning disability, but they'll get it right kind of first time because they're conscious about getting it right. They won't just kind of send half an email out, they'll read through it. And there's all sorts of managers out there, I know, but the manager I have, she's amazing. And it's all about being upfront, being honest. When I went for the interview, I was very honest. I said, emails I ain't good on. If you actually need something doing, give me a call, tell me to send it you back on an email. So it's about having a two-way conversation, and employers not being scared of getting it wrong. Because if they do get it wrong, that's fine. But if they get it wrong and don't change, that's where it's an issue, So, yeah. What about you? I don't know. I feel like personally things are changing, things are getting better, but I think it's just a slower process than what should be happening.
Yeah, well, I think that was the interesting thing about working with you and with everybody else on the book, is that it really is a tale of two, game of two halves, to use a sporting analogy, maybe not swimming, but football. But it's the fact that, we've got 8 incredible people who reflect what can be achieved. But the context to that is, as you said, the sort of progress in terms of attitude and where we are is so slow. And, early on in the book, when I was looking back over some of the history of how people have been treated, I mean, I thought I knew a lot, but really it was quite shocking, really drilling down into the attitudes, the fact that, you know, had my sister been born 50 years ago, you know, we just would have been told to hide her away, just to forget about her and stick her in an institution.
Yeah.
Although you know, we know those places don't exist in that sense, there is still a lot of care or care settings, whatever you want to call them, that operate in that very institutional way. So, you know, you've got to be in bed by 8:30. No, you know, there's 3 of you here, you're all sharing the minibus, you all have to go to the same thing. You can't go to the gym and you can't go to your Zumba class, you all have to. So some of these things are still going on. You know, we mentioned the employment, so these huge inequalities in terms of where people live and how they live. Inequalities in health. I mean, what's going on with COVID now? I mentioned my sister in lockdown, but, you know, more widely, obviously, you know, it's just shameful that the death rates of people with learning disabilities have doubled in this period. So by the 2 halves, I mean, we've got all amazing stuff going on, that you're proving every day, that my sister's proving by becoming more independent and trying to. And yet the backdrop is the sort of very lazy attitudes towards people. And that's a hangover from how they used to be treated. So that's, but on the positive, we've got this amazing array of people doing incredible things, driven by, and this is also the context of the book, I guess, driven by a real grassroots movement. People like Gary that Mark mentioned at City Lit, you know, who was a former student at City Lit, is a real trailblazer, veteran campaigner for civil rights, and has put together and founded an organisation a few years ago that brings together for the first time people, their families, their allies, whether they're academics or organisations. So it's sort of, over here we've got this amazing stuff going on, and in the background there's all the negative stuff, and we just need to go a bit faster. That's my long take on that.
Yeah. Well, you talk about, like, your sister there, about trying to be more independent, but I don't know, for me, I always try and celebrate the small things. So it was always about, I learned to drive, for example, and my mum and dad were great because they were like, well, we don't have to get up at 4:30 a.m. to take him morning training. So that was great. But, you know, it's all about maybe trying to celebrate the small achievements. And I think that's what we don't do enough, is celebrating, you know, these people, they do have learning difficulties, or they might be struggling in certain aspects, but we should maybe try and celebrate if they do have a very small achievement, which the majority of the society might not see as anything, but we still got to celebrate it if they've gotten the bus on their own, or they've cooked a meal, or they've, you know, and this is, I have a swimmer now, she comes into the building on her own, and she comes onto poolside, checks I'm there, and then goes and gets changed. But when she did that the first time, you would have thought she just won a gold medal somewhere. You know, it was all very much celebrated. And I think that's what we maybe don't do enough of, is celebrate very small things.
I couldn't agree more. And that's in the book. I describe my sister's everyday success, which is exactly that. It's choosing her own shopping. It's getting on the bus. But I suppose a sort of final point was just related to what you were saying there about the everyday achievements. I mean, looking back, what if you had to pick, and I know this is really hard, but if you had to pick 1 or 2 things that you were sort of proudest of, what would it be? Would it be the ordinary achievement, you know, driving the 40 medals that you've got, Dan? 40 medals, gold, bronze. What would it be?
I'm not too sure, really. I've got some standout races that I've done. So, you know, I was double world champ in 2010. I was seriously ill in 2013. I literally had 2 weeks in hospital, then flew out to Montreal. Was having to throw a bucket of water over my head, which would basically make me be sick. So then that didn't happen when I dived in. And I managed somehow to get a silver on the 200 IM. So that was a pretty phenomenal swim. So that one's always stuck with me. And then
can you remind us what IM is?
Sorry, yeah. So IM is individual medley. So it's fly, butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, front crawl. So yeah, I was a little bit behind, and then having to really floor it on the breaststroke, which I did, and clinged on for dear life pretty much down the freestyle. As I finished, my coach basically lifted me out of the pool. I was gone physically. Yeah, so that one, and then since then I've done my personal training, so that's kind of a big achievement, and it's kind of a stepping stone to my next goal of wanting to have a gym where people with learning difficulties or with any kind of disability to come and work out a very, I'm not going to say simple gym, but a very easy gym to navigate. There won't be lots of people, there won't be pressure there. That's kind of a goal of mine in the future.
That's brilliant. I think that the race you mentioned there, just to finish off, if anyone who's listening in today hasn't read that chapter, that particular race, even though I know your story really well, the Montreal race just had me hooked. You are just, I just felt like I was there in the pool, way behind you, had I been in the pool with you. But it's a brilliant bit of explains your drive and your passion. So yeah, thank you, Dan.
No.
I don't know if you want to come in and ask.
Yeah, I mean, thank you both. That's wonderfully set up for us. Saba, first off, there are a number of stories. Dan's one of the highlights. Just give people a taste from the book of a couple of the other characters and the other authors in the book. And what
I think the word characters is brilliant, because I think one thing with this book, and one thing I wanted to read a book about personalities and people, and not just the success, but to get a real flavour of what drives somebody. And so yes, characters is the right word. So, I mean, I suppose the interesting thing is that there is something for everybody in terms of, if you're into fine art, then you might want to read Laura's story. So Laura was the first learning disabled woman to be selected for the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition. So that's out of, I think, something like 12,000 paintings that submitted to this very prestigious exhibition. Laura's was one of about 1,000. And she's an incredible advocate for how to express yourself and how to really reach your potential, what support need in place. We've got Sarah Gordy. Sarah is an actor who people might know from BBC's The A Word, and she's done a lot of stage and screen. And so her story, along with Matthew Hellett's story, Matthew's a filmmaker and drag artist actually as well, and both their stories are about the representation of learning disability on screen, but kind of both in front of and behind the lens. And that goes back to what Dan and I were talking about, employment and where you see people and people becoming more visible. And then obviously there's Gary's story, Gary Bolle, which is a really interesting insight how things have changed. Gary really was somebody who broke new ground in terms of the idea of self-advocacy, so speaking up for yourself and campaigning without being spoken for or about. So yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I think people should read the book really. But there really is, I mean, they're just remarkable people. And, every time I had a meeting, when I came away from meeting Dan, and I just felt, well, I felt like I should do some exercise for a start. I felt very motivated, but they're just remarkable people. And actually, you know, it's not about the gongs. It's not about, like Dan was saying, it's not just about appearing on stage at the National Theatre or making a speech in front of 1,000 people, but it's also about how you define success. So it's the everyday success, my sister's success. But I think that gives you a flavour.
It does, it gives us beautiful flavour. John Herzog, who's a former tutor at City Lit, he's picking up on the theme about it being a two-way street and not this idea that, you know, the help goes one direction and therefore there's an inequality of between sort of the different communities. And I think that's something that is really important. I think the book emphasizes that actually everybody can benefit from relationships across different groups. And I'd like you both to talk about that. Just the one thing I just really like to pick up in terms of City Lit's curriculum, and the one thing that I've observed, we have a group called the Percussion Orchestra, and that's collaboration between City Lit music students who have learning disabilities and the Royal Academy of Music. The Royal Academy of Music students are obviously some of the best in the country, and that program's now, I think, in its 4th year. Alex is one of our tutors, does an amazing job there. I've observed a number of things around this group that, again, there is, it's a two-way street. It's apparently the most oversubscribed program at the Academy in terms of their students getting involved. So students want to come back year after year, and then other students want to get in on the action. They've now performed for Princess Anne, they've performed at the British Museum, but there is a real quality, and it's not just one group helping the other. Everybody learns from that interaction. And I'd be interested in both of your thoughts around this almost, as you say, sort of Gary's experience is that help is, we will help that group, it is us doing good, as opposed to actually there's an equality here and there's a real understanding of diversity and inclusion. Is there either of you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, so for me, it would be again, it's that two-way street. So they're also succeeding amazingly well if they're really, really oversubscribed. So they should really celebrate that and like how they can really move that forward and where they can take it and be really excited about all the opportunities that should be there for them. And if they're not there for them, why are they not there? And then just pushing the boundaries, for Princess Anne, that must have been amazing. So, you know, really, really celebrate that. And you know, yeah. What about you, Saba?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I agree. The idea that you know, we're just missing out on people and their talents, and you know, diversity. Everybody talks about diversity, and you know, it's fantastic that we have the idea of inclusive societies and diversity in terms of race and gender and sexual equality, and somehow disability and learning disability specifically does not seem to be part of that. But I mean, in terms of it being a two-way street, I'm just thinking personally, you know, what my sister has brought out in me and in my family is some of the best qualities, really. I think that she has led the way in terms of, you know, all those good things like compassion, sensitivity, tolerance, all the things that make a society, I think, you know, the full human qualities. And it's interesting that this idea of a two-way street, even if people are being really well-meaning, doing things for somebody, you know, helping them, it's not meant in a negative way, but it goes back to what Dan was saying about just a little bit of support to help someone do something for themselves rather than do it for them. And you know, if you if you mollycoddle and if you insist on doing something for somebody else, it becomes a patronizing kind of relationship. Yeah, I mean, essentially, I just think, just looking at just the 8 stories in the book, well, more than that, if you include some examples in my sister's story as well, you know, just imagine a world without that, where we don't fully include that, and just reflects what's already out there. These are 8 amazing stories that stand for what more we could celebrate and enjoy, you know, if we look hard enough. Basically, it's out there. It's not hard to reach. It's just we don't try hard enough, I think.
I think that I completely agree with both of you, and there's a very good question from Dan Fishel, which I'd like to sort of direct towards Ardan here, is the integration of the education system and inclusivity of people with learning disabilities being in mainstream education is very important. You talk about in your chapter about the fact that your parents insisted that you and your sisters went to the same school. Now, obviously, that presented some challenges, but also presented some opportunities. So is there an observation you have at all around the integration around education? Because education is so important to people's lives at all stages.
Yeah. So, you know, the education side was unbelievable. Where I was at Poynton High, you know, the learning support sector, you know, they really did help me through that. But if you just sidebar that a second and you think about, well, actually, it was all the other things around it. So I've managed to have the same group of friends. You know, we still meet, we still go out, and it's the same group of friends through school. So as much as I might have been coming from maybe the learning side, the disability side, or forget what they called it now, but like the special sector that I might have been on for one class that day, and going to my friends, they didn't treat me any differently just because I've not come out of the same classroom. And I think that's what I was really take from it. And then the same side as that is, it also embeds a little bit about when we went out to play PE. All of a sudden, I'm in the top set and you know, running circles literally around him as I was waiting for them, and that's because that was my strength. So it embeds. It doesn't always have to embed maybe the learning side, but it embeds like inner strength a little bit for myself. Anyway, it embedded inner strength of, well, actually, no, I can't read as well as Tom over there, but as soon as we're out in PE in the next class, I'll do 3 extra laps because, you know, he's unfit or whatever, you know. So it was embedding that. And then the like I said, the friends side really, it's made me kind of who I am, and not shy away from what I can't do and celebrate what I could. And they, you know, they were the games. They've travelled up and down the country to watch me race. I've got a friend actually that he's in an orchestra as well, so I've been to watch him. So it's about them connections as well as so you're not just in the same group all the time. You know, I wasn't with people that only had learning difficulties being passed around, if that makes sense.
That's great. Saba, have you got any reflections? Because as you said just before, you know, society would have often said, well, let's hide this group and actually let's segregate and let's treat differently. Are we making progress there, do you think?
I mean, I think, yes, we are. As I think I was saying before, a lot of the progress, well, frankly, all the progress that's been made because of people and families and campaigners fighting against status quo. So yes, absolutely. And I don't want to paint a bleak picture. I don't feel it is bleak. I think there are things that are under threat right now because of COVID and lockdown. Progress is being made. I mean, I can only talk, just going back to the question, the original question about education, special educational needs. So my experience, with my family's experience, that my sister went to an absolutely fantastic mainstream school that had a special support unit, and she would have some lessons in there that she needed extra help with, and other lessons she would be with all the other kids. And it was a real mixed ability environment. And what struck me when I used to go and meet her after school was the fact that these are kids growing up with a real sense of inclusion. Like, you know, the child sitting next to you might not be able to, you know, as Dan was saying, read in the same way or write in the same way, but it sort of becomes normalized that you see people around you that have differing abilities. And that, you know, if we can carry that on, I mean, how often do you see somebody, I mean, obviously not now with lockdown, but how often ordinarily would you see someone on your high street with a learning disability? You know, people aren't as visible as they should be. So I think, yeah, progress definitely is being made. All is not lost. And you know, it's so much is in the book about the stories of the people and the great strides that they've made in terms of equality and inclusion, but it's just somehow the pace of it is just much slower than it should be, because the will isn't there. I think at government level there is nothing to drive this forward, really. You know, it's not a priority, as we've seen, you know, with lockdown.
Great, thanks. Alex Thomas has got a question for you, Dan. Can you give an example of when you felt that you changed attitudes in somebody, when suddenly you saw somebody have that little light bulb moment of getting it and getting differences? And can you think of any particular breakthrough moments where you've seen the effect that you and your abilities have had an effect on somebody else?
Yeah, so there's been various different ones through school and stuff like that. But to bring it maybe a bit to this decade, would be one when I was actually swim coaching, and there was this coach there, and he was really, really good coach, but he just wouldn't express to a swimmer how he wanted them to swim properly. So I discussed what I thought the problem with this swimmer's stroke was, and eventually got him to see that. And then I also then discussed to a swimmer that didn't understand what this coach was saying, and demonstrated it and manipulated the swimmer's arm into the right place, used different language, easier language for the swimmer to understand, because we talk a lot in terminology about front end catch and all sorts of stuff. So and then afterwards, the coach's attitude really changed. All of a sudden, he was asking me for my opinion, because he could see that I actually knew a bit about swimming, and he was asking about how he could coach his swimmer better then. So I like use different terminology, only give a couple of examples, don't overload her with information. And then since then, I've had about 4 other coaches now emailing me with questions and how they can work with their swimmers in a way that is fair, not separate, but the swimmer gets out of it. And actually one of them's just made it on the GB squad, so he's done a great job of coaching her, and you know, he's come on leaps and bounds with his understanding and everything. So it's kind of a few there, but it was more about changing and getting him to listen to myself about the information that I do have about the sport.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Dan. It really does bring it to life. Well, I'm just very conscious, actually, the hour's flown by. I just wanted, a number of people have asked, and I apologize for, there's been quite a lot of questions coming through, so I've tried to kind of choose ones that are specific to where we're leading. And the last one, which is, Dan spoke a little bit earlier about some of the challenges around lockdown. I suppose the question is, there are specific challenges being in lockdown and then coming out of lockdown, and different groups and different parts of society coming out at different times, and equality and lack of equality around that. I suppose to take a step back is when we look back at this period, hopefully in happier times, is lockdown going to have put us backwards, or is going to put us forwards in terms of understanding and appreciation of the challenges around learning disabilities, but also the opportunities? Do you think it's kind of the positive trajectory has been stalled, or do you think it'll kind of regain itself? Dan, then Saba.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely been stalled. I really feel that we could now capitalise on it, though, if that makes sense. We've got some great information coming out, and obviously there's very much the eye on how this is affecting people. So maybe we could capitalise on that a little bit. But with that being said, you can only keep hoping for change and for things to move forward. So that's where I would kind of go with it, is it might have stalled. It's kind of how I work. We might have stalled, but let's now keep pushing forward, change the goals or change the outset or the timetable or whatever system you're using. But it doesn't mean that it needs to stop. It just needs to change a bit or set a new goal.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Dan. Saba.
I mean, I have to say, I agree that there's so much sort of positive thinking, I suppose, that's happened. There's a lot more compassion. You know, we're looking at, I'm just talking generally in our neighbourhoods and societies since lockdown. And it's a case of harnessing that and making sure it extends to everybody in our communities. You know, right at the lockdown, I was, you know, working on something about how, you know, we're making meals for our neighbours, we're looking out for older people. But, you know, are we also considering that there might be someone with a learning disability and an underlying condition who also needs that support? Or, you know, people with learning disabilities who have more time on their hands and might want to help out and be the person giving something back. So I think we are on the cusp, and I know this from talking to so many people in the learning disability movement, that trying very hard and succeeding at shining a light on this stuff. You know, people doing amazing things with easy read versions, you know, incredible resources coming out. I mean, you mentioned Beyond Words. I mean, some fantastic work going on there to make sure that everybody has an understanding and is included in what's sort of going on right now. But it's just driving that forward, really. So kind of both good and bad, I suppose. I don't mean to fudge the answer, but I can see both positives and negatives. And at the moment, personally, I am really worried that my sister's going to take a step backwards in terms of, as I said before, her visibility and her independence, just her general sort of stability in her everyday life. So I would really like the government to come out with, you know, something that included everybody and stop issuing the 3-word slogans. So I'm going to stop there because I will continue otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it's responsibility on all of us, not just those in the sector, but it's a society as a whole, to make sure that we continue what was a positive trajectory. If you think about, you know, Gary's story in particular as a kind of how far we have come. You know, a road is always not linear, but you know, you do have little slipbacks, but to ensure that we get back on the path around improvement is going to be really important. And I know we at CityLit have a kind of huge commitment to get our learning disability students back in the college safely as quickly as we can do, but it's that balance between safety and also ensuring that they return to a nurturing environment of where we can do the best by them and they do the best by us. And we have great performances, we have great art shows, all of those things are hugely part of our kind of overarching community at the college. I am very conscious that we're now over time, and I'll get shouted at by somebody at some point because of that. What I wanted to do just to end was to thank both of you. Dan, thank you for being such an inspiration. Your chapter in the book was just brilliant. And I'm really, to give a bit of a teaser for other people, I'm really annoyed at Spanish basketball players or whatever they were that kind of caused all that trouble in 2000. But for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that means you've got to read the book. And so thank you for that, and thank you for being a huge inspiration. Saba, I just want to say, the idea of putting this book together and bringing these stories together is genius. It makes such a difference. And actually, the diversity of the stories, I think, is part of the strength of the book. It's not everybody did one thing. It's as you say, people in politics, people in the arts, people in sports. I think that that's what's brilliant. It's the idea that every part of society has something to contribute, and to go back to what we were just saying before, that it is a two-way street. Society is better because of it as well, and individuals within society interacting with each other. I mean, it's part of, you know, City Lit's ethos is that you bring people together who possibly wouldn't be together otherwise, and you actually see so much more than just learning a language or learning an art. They actually improve as humans by the interaction with people that they wouldn't be in their own little silo in the world. So for me, that's hugely important. I'd also like to, I would like to acknowledge Saba did a wonderful piece for The Guardian around the challenge around virus, around people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And for everybody, I'm going to plug this book to death. So please buy a copy. It's ridiculously cheaply priced. You should have made far more money out of it, but it's at $8.99. You can order it on all good websites during this point, and you can also get it in places like Waterstones in their physical shops that are now opened. I'd like to give a little plug to Unbound, who are a great publisher and publish things that maybe other publishers would not do. They're a marvelous organization. I know one of our tutors at the moment has got one of our novels published by them. So plug for the book, plug for Unbound, but also, so we'll send a link to everybody about the book afterwards, but also a link to Saba's article in The Guardian about the deaf community during this time, and want to make sure that the various communities that the college represents gets that degree of advocacy on behalf of them. So Dan, Saba, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody who's been part of this today. And also I apologize for anybody we didn't get to the questions while we were on, but hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. I'm going to formally invite you now, sometime probably in 2021, to come into the college and do this in person, and we'll have a reprise and maybe bring a couple of your co-authors in as well, physically into the building when we get a chance to do that again. But in the meantime, this has been wonderful to be able to do it virtually. Dan, Saba, everybody, Charmaine, thank you, and take care, everybody. Okay,
Thanks.
goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.